Good morning, everybody. Okay, let's get things organized here, and we'll do a quick intro here. Hope you're all having a great Sunday morning, and thanks for coming in. Hey, Fluffy, just made it in time, right? Rachel's still doing her Patreon stream at the moment. She ran an hour longer today, so I would imagine there's several of the VC family over there for a little while. Yet while she's doing her thing, Rob the Waxed came up, and so it's been good to hang out with him, and Rob Walker's there, and of course Gianni. Anyway, I got a good show today. And just ended. Oh, she ended it so that she wouldn't cross me. So anyway, I thought I would. Hey, Raji, good to see you. Yeah, we're every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. We'll go for a little while here and hang out. So anyway, I thought I'd just show a few records and bring up my guest here. I went to the Longview Record Show last week and found some good records. But I think I showed them a lot of those last week. But speaking of Rob the Waxed, a 74 that I got from him, and I think my guest might know this person, Eric Dolphy. This is I think it's a 3-record set from released in 1974. I've only listened to the first record, but this is really good. I really enjoyed this. It's good it's a prestige release. Hey, Rich, good to see you. So this was really good to add to my 74s. I got that mailed to me from Muscle Beach down in California, and recently I bought just for very cheap a small about 60 records or something like that, and there was a bunch of avant-garde albums in there, and so I'm gonna be bringing some of those up, and one of them was Steve Reich drumming. I haven't listened to this yet, but it's a box set as well, and looking forward to that. So anyway, without further ado, maybe if you saw the thumbnail for the show today, you might get a you might have been able to guess who my guest is. He's actually kind of a neighbor of mine. He only lives maybe 35 minutes north of me here, and he's a fellow Oregonian, and I'm happy to have him on the show this morning to talk about his life and his record collecting journey. And he is Dr. Robert. Good morning, Doc. How you doing?
Hey, Marty. Great. Good to see you.
Make it this morning.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. I really am. I'm
really looking forward to this chat and talking about your life and how you got to where you are now, and maybe some medical talk and stuff like that. So why don't you start off by telling us where you weren't born in Oregon, where you were born someplace else?
Yeah, I was born in a small town in Iowa.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Corn-fed boy. Okay.
Yeah, my first job was as a detasseler, which, if anybody knows what that is, you get up at 6 a.m. and we used to bike down to the Hy-Vee lot at about 14 or 15 years old. And for $2 an hour, we get on a school bus and walk through a cornfield. And the principle of detasseling is you're making a hybrid corn. So you take the tassels off what are about 5 rows, which are called the female rows, and you leave the pollen tassels on one row, which is then the male rows, and the pollen from the male rows fertilizes the corn from the female rows. And so you end up with a slightly, the corn then from that process is a hybrid corn that has a different genetic makeup. And I don't even know the ins and outs of why they do that, but that's what they do. And they used to pay us $2 an hour and an hour each way for the bus ride, which was usually at least an hour and a half. So
wow,
yeah,
right on.
That made me
so you're 14 or 15 years old. Did you go to school back in Iowa, or what brought you out west?
Well, that experience made me decide, to stay in school, and so I ended up doing undergrad out in Iowa at University of Iowa, and I messed around for I was a professional student for a number of years, and I couldn't figure out what the hell I wanted to do. And I had thought about medicine, but I really wanted to be a teacher and an academic. And so I spent several years working in that direction, and I ended up in a project in at UC Berkeley with between an engineer and an orthopedic surgeon, and we were looking at knee joint movement. And my job was to help make a device to track movement across the knee joint. The story I tell is one evening we had to pick up. I may have told this on Rachel, so I appreciate.
I haven't heard it yet. Yeah.
All right. So I apologize if I'm repeating it,
Not
but
at all.
one Saturday night, me and a buddy had to go across the Bay Bridge and pick up a cadaverous leg from the anatomy lab there in order to drill. We were going to drill into the bone, which we did do, and anchor these devices to the bones above and below the knee to measure the motion. And we show up at the anatomy cadaver lab, and we're met by a guy who's kind of like an Igor character, and he's all by himself, and he says, "Oh yes, I've been expecting to come this way." And we walk behind him, and he gives us a garbage bag and a bone saw and a scalpel, and pulls out this cadaverous older gentleman and said, "Here you go." And so we very unceremoniously hacked the leg off this
Wow.
throw it in the garbage bag and drive back to the lab. And we get there and dump it into the freezer. And my buddy says, "That's the worst thing I have ever done." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, but it was kind of cool though." And so from that point on, I decided, okay, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I'll do research and teach in that field. And that's going to be my field. And I never looked back. And so, that was it.
Ultimately though, you switched from orthopedics to spine. Is that right?
Yeah. So almost every surgical field has subspecialties. So spine is a subspecialty of orthopedics. So you do the orthopedics training, and then you do an additional year in spine, and then that ended up being I hardly ever did general orthopedics. I only did it for a few years, really, after training.
So the distinction there then is not neurospine, but structural spine field.
It's a great question, and it's one that I think even people in the subspecialty struggle to define the difference. But neurosurgeons do spine surgery, and orthopedic surgeons do spine surgery. Historically, there used to be some distinctions that, the ortho guys would do the stabilization, and the neuro guys would do the neurologic decompression work. But it really has evolved now to where both specialties do very similar spinal work. So everything that needs to be done, either specialty really can do at this point.
Now, when you're in medical school, were you into records and music at that time?
I was. So I went to med school from 88 to 92. I was down in San Diego, and there was, that was an era where, when I had time, I would go to Goodwill, and I would go to garage sales and just pick up. I can remember scoring all kinds of records in that era. And there was a guy down there who got an in with one of the thrift stores, not one of the commercial ones, but a smaller thrift store. And he would kind of, curate their albums, but he would pull a bunch of them and build up a stack. And then he would have a sale in his yard and his garage for $3 a record. And he was paying probably $1 a record. I don't know. But man, I got so many records out of that. And I don't know, this was all pre-internet, so I have no idea. I can't remember how I ever stumbled across that or knew when he was going to do it, but I don't think I ever missed a sale. And God, I would take it was like the Longview Record Show. I would take a box home from that. I guess about once a quarter it was. So that was during the era of CDs, and I stopped buying new vinyl, which I regret. I shifted over, and anything new I was buying out of the store, I would buy in CD format, but I still wanted used vinyl, and I still sought it out, and never sold my vinyl collection. So
were you before you went to California, were you collecting vinyl at all? Did you listen when you were younger?
Yeah. So I've got this organized, I'll tell you, so that I've tried to organize this into a sequence of kind of things.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then I'll hopefully draw out a sort of lesson about collecting, or an approach that I use to collecting from each of the kind of genres and
Okay.
that I found. So,
Yeah, autobiographical. Love it.
well, hopefully it comes across well. I started collecting when I was in 7th grade. I had a buddy that was into it, and I remember he had the Eagles' greatest hits, and
Mhm.
I think he had the Beatles' Blue album, and he had some Kiss records, and I don't remember what else, but I was over at his place and he had already started collecting. I'm like, this is so cool. And so from that moment on, I was into it. And I never, in a small town in Iowa, for me, it was one of the things that opened up the world to me, there wasn't that much. And I love my hometown, and I still have friends and family there. I'm not being judgmental, but it wasn't exactly New York City, I guess.
Right.
So.
Yeah, yeah. Were you into when you were a teenager, were you into the gear at all? Yeah,
You
did it
know, I, I
when did that come along?
I am not nearly as much of a gearhead as most folks in the vinyl community are. I do have good equipment. I'm kind of in between systems right now, so I'm needing to put some stuff back together. But back in the day, actually, the first really decent stereo I bought was with detasseling money. I saved up my money from detasseling, and I bought a Zenith Wedge, right, which was a unit. It was their top flight, top level machine, but not anything special. And I
Yeah.
remember one of my buddies chiding me for it. He's like, "What did you buy? You don't need that. You should buy components. You don't want to." I'm like, "Ah, whatever." So I had that. That was my first decent stereo, and I had that all the way through medical school, to be honest. So I had
Okay.
it for probably 15 years at least, maybe 20. I don't know.
So is that does that have integrated speakers, or is it
Well, no,
okay?
they're not integrated. They're plug-in speakers, but the whole, it had an 8-track player in it, of
Okay.
course, and
Yeah.
it had a turntable on it and the amp, and it had a radio receiver, so it had all the components built into one chunk of hardware.
Okay. Yeah. And they were Zenith speakers as well?
I think so, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sure. I'm
that's
sure.
cool. So, yeah, what if you want to start showing a few things here, I'll pop in questions along the way.
Well, I'll try to show these. So these aren't the first records I bought, but it was among the first band that I really fell in love with. Like, not
Yeah.
not infrequently among teenage male boys. And
So
so
I see those albums occasionally, and with all four there, are they give us a background on what year was that? Was it like 75 or was that
78.
78? And are they different songs composed by each of the guys?
I think so. These fall into a group of records that I say, I really haven't played them much. I,
Yeah.
I was really into Destroyer and Dress to Kill. I had those. I played the grooves off of those when I first got them. But what I like about these and what I wanted to show them is one of the things about collecting for me that is a real habit is this thing of completeness, right? So
Mhm.
complete set counts more than only having one of these solo records. And the other thing about this is posters. So when it comes with a poster, you got to get the poster too.
Mm.
And these all had posters in them, and it's actually a set of posters, which is even more kind of goofy. But
Cool.
they interlock, so you can put all 4 Kiss posters up on your
Okay,
wall.
like a puzzle. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So at any rate,
Did you feel like you wanted to preserve the posters and not put them on your wall, or did you put them up on your wall?
I don't think I ever put a poster up. I probably did a couple,
Yeah.
but not in a long while. Yeah,
Okay.
anything that comes in the album stays in the album for me now. So
Right on.
so
Yeah.
but that was one of the very earliest bands that I kind of fell in love with and thought were cool. And I never got a chance to see them live. I guess around the same time frame I was really into Alice Cooper, right? So again, another teenage boy band, and I did see Alice at the UNI Unidome in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and he was drunk as a skunk up on stage,
Really?
tumbling around. Yeah, but I didn't hold it against him. I still
Yeah.
collect his stuff too. So
Right on. Was it strictly rock and roll at that age?
it was. So for me, the Beatles, I really fell in love with the Beatles. I had some Bowie stuff. I had, at that time, stuff that was on the radio. I had some Heart records. I had Billy Joel. Those were among the first records I bought. And it wasn't until I got to college that kind of my view opened a little bit wider.
Yeah,
And,
you're with other students from around the country and the world and stuff like that are
right.
listening to different things and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, just there's more in front of you, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it common to swap records with friends and listen to their records or them? A lot of times in the 70s, I come across records with names all over it, and they'll put them, on the label and everything like that because people tell me they would take them to parties and they wouldn't want to lose their record, right? 'Cause they wanted it to be known it was theirs.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to roommates, right? So you're in an apartment or
Dorm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, dorm room, and your roommates have records too. So whose are whose? Yeah.
Right.
I actually never did that, but and I might have lost a few records along the way. I think I lost a couple. I did, I know, but not very many. But
Right
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So you're in medical school, and did you really? Is that when the collecting or the completist bug kind of took over?
I think maybe even earlier than that. So as an undergraduate, I really was buying a lot of records then too, and I
Okay.
got into several genres that I hadn't really, been exposed to. So one of those was punk rock. So I graduated high school in '79, and this record here is the copy that I bought, and I think I bought
Oh,
it in
great.
'79 out of the record store, and just fell in love with this record.
Yeah.
And I still love several things about it. I mean, I love this cover, which calls out Elvis.
It's amazing. It's iconic for sure.
It's iconic,
Yeah.
and of course the music on it is just so good. And this is a U.S. pressing, and this is again kind of the completeness bug. And I like collecting alternate copies of the same record. So this is a Japanese pressing of that record that I got much later, and then this is a UK pressing. So
Do you A/B them sometimes, like to hear the difference in the pressing?
I do, and I'm doing that more now than I probably ever have. But I am trying to, now I have the time to really stay home and just listen to stuff.
Yeah.
And and that's just a single off of the record.
Okay. It is fun. I have done it just a little bit now. I have a few records that are both you. I was listening to 10cc. I just got a UK copy of 10cc's Deceptive Bends, and hearing the difference in the pressing is evident. And I had never done that before, and it really is neat to kind of I'm just now getting into discovering the different sounds, and my friends like you haven't, I'm hearing what that sounds like because before I were really, a record would be a record. It wouldn't matter where it was, but there really is a difference, and finding out what sounds better and listening for the differences and stuff like the sonic differences. It's fascinating. It really is.
It really is. I mean, and it's fun, right? I mean,
Yeah, it is fun.
and especially these days with all of the new, I think one of the things, and I'm not a big collector of a lot of the new pressings and new masterings that are coming out on various labels, but that process, I do understand guys wanting those records, and the techniques and the equipment and the skills that I think are now available compared to in the 70s and 80s. I think it has been night and day difference, and so you can really hear improvements in how those records are made, and certainly from pressings along the way too. I think you can hear differences there too. So yeah, it's a fun part of the hobby, right?
There's a channel that I really like. I forget. I think his name might be Michael. I'm not sure, but it's The Pressing Matters, and he does a lot of living stereos, classical and popular stuff, and he compares them. He'll get 5 or 6 different copies of the same classical record, whether it's Mobile Fidelity or something like that, and compare them with the originals. And it really is fascinating. He's got a fine-tuned ear, And so he talks about the subtleties, and I like the living stereo stuff too, because a lot of times, because when you find them and they're in good shape, they're generally pretty cheap, you know, when you in thrift stores and stuff like that. And I like the cover art and that goes along with it. So pretty cool.
It is cool. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay, proceed.
Okay. So I said I broke it into genres, and I have to say one of the things that I think about and analyze in my own collection is, well, how good is my soul collection? How good is my blues collection? And how good is I'm going to go to jazz. All right. So jazz is an area where, I mean, I love jazz music. I have a lot of jazz records. I have a lot of, rare and collectible stuff, and I look for that. But I have to say, I wouldn't say I have a great jazz collection. And the reason is, I know many collectors that have a better one. Is simply and I think if you focus, because that's one of the things I'm bad at. I like a wide variety of genres, and so it's not like I focus exclusively on jazz, where I think there are collectors who are more focused on that. But however they've done it, they've come across the records, that are part of their collection, and acquired them. But the first jazz record I really honed in on was this one, and I don't remember how he came across my radar screen. Again, pre-internet, who told me, oh, you should listen to John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. This is a later. I had the copy I had back in school was a much later repress on a different label that I've now sold. But this is an original on the Impulse label, U.S. pressing. Again, similar to what I was talking about. Here's a British pressing of that. Here's one I probably should get rid of, and I'm working on that. Duplicate copies or copies that are simply repressings. This is a red label Impulse. That I don't know. I don't know what the advantage of that over an original would be.
Do you like A Love Supreme? Is it an album that you enjoy listening to?
Oh my God, I love it. Yeah, I fell in love with it when I listened to it just at the very beginning.
Okay.
And he was such a devout man, I think. And I don't even know what his religious pursuits were, but it's obvious from his music that he was serious about it. And that song Psalm on here, where he actually is speaking the psalm, the words of the psalm, into his saxophone, I just find it very moving. So yeah, I love John Coltrane. He's one I've got, I'm still working on. He put out so much music, but it's an example of jazz. And here I'll show. So I have bought a few of these new, and so that is one that I did buy, and I have yet to make the comparison to the original, but that's on my list. Maybe this afternoon.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's some jazz. That's an entry into jazz.
And when you were in college, jazz was becoming a thing for you?
Yeah, that was definitely the first place. I didn't play and one of the things I regret is I do not play any musical instruments. I like to sing. I'm not a great singer. I've never really sung on stage, but I've never been a musical performer. I started into jazz band and then quit, very early and never mastered anything. So it wasn't until really later as a, member of the audience that I kind of fell in love with jazz music.
Okay. So you graduated. Did you practice medicine in Oregon? Did you come right to Oregon, or did you go someplace else first?
Well, the training is a 10-year process. So I did med school down in San Diego for 4 years, and then I went out to University of Iowa again, where I had done my undergrad, and I had visited and really liked the program out there. And so I went out there to learn orthopedic surgery, and that was 5 years as a resident there. And then I went to Cleveland for 1 year to do what was called a spine fellowship with a very senior orthopedic spine surgeon out there, and had a wonderful year there in training. That was definitely the best out of the 10 years in terms of, being able to focus on what you most want and being at a senior enough level, that you still don't get treated as with respect, as I'll say. I mean, at least back in the day when I did it. I think it's different now that residents are not as abused, but we would be harassed and verbally abused and
Hazed a bit, yeah.
hazed and shouted at. I mean,
Yeah.
it was all part of the deal. But by the time you get to fellowship, that kind of falls away, and they treat you more like not a partner, but maybe a junior colleague of some sort. So.
Okay. So you're back in Iowa doing that, and then did you start when you were finished with that, with your 10-year? Where'd you do? Where'd you
Yeah,
go?
from there, my first job was in Portland,
It
and
was.
yeah,
What? Okay, tell us about the decision to come out west and kind of come to the Pacific Northwest.
yeah. So I had been, in the Bay Area for 4 years for just kind of kicking around and doing some graduate school, and then 4 years down in San Diego. So I'd been on the West Coast. So even though I'd been born and raised in Iowa, when I went back there, I was like the California kid. They all considered me,
Okay.
you're some loopy West Coaster, and
Yeah.
so but I enjoyed the time there. But my wife, who I'd met on the West Coast, really wanted to come back to the West Coast.
Okay.
And so I looked at several jobs, but the only one really that was an academic job, a university job on the West Coast, was the one at Portland. And I sort of took it thinking I'd be here a couple of years and move elsewhere, and I ended up working here 18 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
It's
kind of
you're clearly you're an Oregonian now. No doubt about it. Would you call yourself an Oregonian?
I would, except for the tax implications
Yeah, we are one of the most taxed states here, even though we don't have sales tax.
yeah.
We our property tax and the other stuff is crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
But I love Portland. I love
Yeah.
Portland, and there's been a lot in the news media, and I get asked about that. How is Portland these days? Portland's fine. Portland's fine.
It really is a great town. Every big town goes through cycles and popularity and some hate and all that kind of stuff. But I am it's one of those cities it's not so huge that you can't learn all about Portland. It's even compared to Seattle, it's small, but yet there's still a great international flavor. Lots of really creative things going on. The food is fantastic, and I feel so fortunate. I was born 30 minutes from where I live now in Lebanon, and I've been here, and I've lived other places, but this is I feel extremely fortunate, lucky to be a Oregon boy and to have grown up here. It's a special place,
Yeah.
and I think it's maintained its charm over the years, even though it's a little bit different. Portland and Eugene are more of a liberal bastions and stuff like that, but I think for the most part, there's kind of an Oregonian sensibility that pervades all political aspects, and just really sweet people from east to west, and I love it.
Yeah.
Do you
agree more.
when so you what was it like the first couple of years being in? What was did you settle in really quick when you came out to Portland? Did you feel at home right away, or did it take some time to grow on you?
I'd say it took a little while, but not anything extraordinary. I remember being the first winter or two, when you get to May,
Yeah.
and it's still gray and rainy all day long.
Yeah.
It's a little tough, and when you're working, and I've realized this in retirement, when you're working, December, January, February, when the sun sets at 4:30 and doesn't rise till 7:30, you don't really notice it when you're in some building working, but when you're at home, it's like, damn, it's 4:30 and it's already dark. I mean,
Yeah. You're going to work at night and then you're coming home at night.
yeah, exactly. So it's those are probably the biggest challenges that I see in terms of the environment. I think it's the city environment is what any city has. I mean, you got to be careful a little bit, but don't be foolish. But it does have a lot to offer. You mentioned the restaurants. The restaurant food scene here is so good. Have you seen that movie Pig?
That was just on the tip of my tongue. doc. It is fantastic. I love that movie.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah,
As a
very good, and it's kind of brooding and gray like Portland is, and, but yet yeah, yeah, Nick Cage is fantastic in that movie, and so is it Adam Arkin? He's kind
yeah,
of the baddie,
yes,
yeah.
yes, that's
He's
right.
really good too, yeah,
Good too.
I love that movie. I need to watch it again, it's been a couple of years since I've seen it, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good slice of Portland right
It's a
there.
great yeah, it's a great Portland movie, and one of the things I liked the best out of it was the line, and because I spent time in Seattle, and I love Seattle too.
Mhm.
But there's that line where he's talking about there's going to be an earthquake, and the whole place is going to come down to the ground, and we're all going to have to move out, and then the guy he's talking to says, the young man he's kind of coaching says, well, maybe we could all move to Seattle. And Nick Cage says, no, fuck Seattle.
Fuck
And
Seattle.
the guy goes, yeah, you're right. Fuck Seattle.
Indeed. Yeah.
No offense to my Seattle friends, and I've got a lot, and I love Seattle too. But
There was kind of a thing that was going around several years when I was younger that all the buildings in Portland tilt north. And it's because Seattle sucks.
I've heard that. That's I
Yeah.
may use that. I may use
Use it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So yeah, what's next in your life?
All right. Well, so this is a little bit out of order in terms of when it kind of came into my became of interest to me. But folk music is another one that I am in love with, and I think I have. I'll say again, a fair and folk music is one of those genres that not a ton of people really dig into, right? But
Is
if
that
you're
a 10-inch single or is that
This is 10-inch. So I've
okay?
got a few 10 inches. These are all Woody Guthrie 10 inches. And, I fell
Neat.
in love with Woody Guthrie, but not I first fell in love with Bob Dylan. And he's still maybe my favorite performer of any stripe, band or solo. But,
Okay.
the history and talking about movies again, I mean, that, the Complete Unknown is another that shows the relationship between him and Woody. And, I knew some about that early on, but I was really more just caught by Dylan's own song making. And and this is a tribute record to Woody Guthrie long after he'd passed, that has Dylan singing a couple songs among, Judy Collins and Arlo Guthrie and Odetta and Pete Seeger. So, the impact that I feel like he had on the culture, Woody Guthrie, with the, this machine kills fascists. And
Yeah.
I love the fact now that he sang these songs and wrote these songs about the Columbia River gorge and the Columbia River itself and the dams they were putting in under
Wasn't he was commissioned to do those songs, right?
He was, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an incredible history, and these are the kinds of things I wish our government would figure out how to do. These constructive things that people see going
Yeah.
on and give credit to the government, like building a dam, right?
Yeah.
But Dylan, and I'm going to make a video at some point about his work with the band. I've been pursuing some of these things, so this is one of his box sets with the basement tapes kind of redone. This is another one I just picked up that was done by Third Man Records, Jack White's label out in
Oh, cool.
Nashville.
74 Live, look at that. Is he with the band on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So the two episodes with the band, the first one is in upstate New York, Woodstock, I guess, and all of the sessions they did together just down in the basement, which became the Basement Tapes. And they played a series of concerts just before that where they were getting booed because Dylan was going electric and selling out and all of that.
Yeah.
Then in 74, they came back and toured again together. I think it was just prior to the Rolling Thunder tour. And, at that point, they were all revered and everybody kind of was over the notion that it was a bad thing that they play as a band. And so I think that was, I mean, he's obviously gone on. I have to say that the stuff he put out in the mid 60s for me is still the stuff that I probably come to the most, but he's just never stopped putting out really good music and then going out and performing it. And what a lifetime gift he's given us. I just
Yeah. So
find
I
it.
come across those 60s albums. I have a little corner down in my friend's antique shop where I sell and stuff. And I come across the monos and the stereos. Can you talk a little bit about desirability or your preference regarding that?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take that right into another genre. Okay, I've got
Okay.
them sitting here. So I love, that's another aspect of collecting that's maybe completist, but soul music is one area that I will say I think I've put together. I'm proud of my soul collection, and I don't have many examples here, but here's a mono Aretha. This is the first album she made for Atlantic Records after leaving, I think, Columbia, where they didn't really kind of get her soulfulness, or really what that was, what soul music should sound like, I'll say. So this is a mono copy, has the Otis Redding song "Respect" on it. Such a great record. And here's a stereo copy of that record. Why do you need both? I don't know. I just enjoy it. This is a Taiwanese pressing. I really am not sure
Oh,
I need
neat.
that. I'm not sure. Oh, whatever. So the last thing I'll say about mono and stereo that kind of triggered. Here's a couple more soul. This is instrumental soul. King Curtis kind of led her backing band for most of those Atlantic records and on stage, and in a lot of cases.
What
So
year is that?
this is 72. So
Okay.
this came out, I think he was stabbed to death by some
Oh my.
drug guys out on the steps right in front of his house in New York City. So I think this came out maybe after he was dead, but this one certainly did. This was recorded in '69 with Jack Dupree. But both of these, if you see them, they have these stickers. This is a mono copy for the radio stations. And this is well after they stopped selling mono records, or stopped pressing them, right, for commercial sales. But they would still make mono copies for the radio stations because there was AM radio, and you didn't need stereo for AM radio. And so that was kind of where those came from. So that's some mono stereo
Do
work.
you do you prefer, like, with because there's so uh especially like with Dylan, there is so many monos and stereo mix out there. Do you prefer one or the other? Or
You
does that
know,
really depend on the artist and the pressing?
well, so I certainly prefer true mono to sort of reprocess stereo, right?
Okay.
Artificial stereo. But I think once they mastered really making stereo pressings, there's more depth to it, I think.
Yeah.
Whether that makes it worth, I don't know. I mean, I still like both, and I will say this is one thing I'll cop to. I'm not sure I have the most trained ear, and I listen to guys online, or just in conversation, that are just much more attuned to that than I am. Um, and it's something I'm still working at.
Yeah. Do you remember, when FM came on the scene? Uh, everything was AM, and then all of a sudden was that early '70s, 70, 71?
I think it was there by then. I don't know the history there. That movie FM. Do you remember that?
Uh-uh.
There was a movie called FM. Steely Dan did the title song for it, and that's a Steely Dan song I don't have still a copy of because I don't have that soundtrack. But that was about FM radio, and it definitely is a '70s movie. I don't know. Linda Ronstadt is in it, I remember.
Okay.
I don't know. It must have come out 77, 78, I want to say, something like that. Somebody probably will know.
Yeah, their Wyoming Dave just said 78.
Okay, there you
He's
go. Wyoming
he's
Dave.
he's the resident Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Were you listening to radio much, or did you stick mostly with vinyl?
I had some of both. So radio, I could listen, in bed at night after I was supposed to go to sleep, and I had a little round ball radio, and I would listen to Cardinals baseball on it because we could get those games in way the hell up. Even though I was like 5 hours, 6 hours north of St. Louis, that was an AM station. but I would listen to music too. And I remember hearing Bob Seger Night Moves. I remember when that was on the radio a lot. I remember the DJ playing a copy of 20, I think it was 21st Century Schizoid Man, or maybe it was, what's just the, I'm blanking on the name of the album, the King Crimson album that's off of, but, you know, a big, heavy prog song. And he announced it. He said, all right, I'm going to play this. I think they had to bring this one in here on a forklift.
Yeah, no doubt. Right on.
Yeah.
All right. So a digression a little bit. Are you a Cardinals fan?
I am.
Okay, that's cool. Were you, I remember they were in the series in '85 against Kansas City. And that was the first series that I really paid attention to. I remember I listened to a little bit of the '84, which was I think the Padres and the Tigers, but in '85 it came down to a game 7, and the Royals beat the Cardinals 11-0. I was actually, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was on a Wednesday night, and I snuck out of Wednesday night church to go out to my dad's pickup and listen to the game.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that was back in the day of Vince Coleman and those guys. It was a good team. Yeah. My dad went back to St. Louis for some ag convention and got me Stan Musial's autograph on a photograph. That was one of my childhood treasures. Yeah, Stan the man. It was really cool.
Well, my dad brought it he grew up in St. Louis, my dad, and he brought it into our home, and then I brought it into my home with my son. So we've been back to Cardinals games, not every, but often. But I remember the series you're talking about. So for one thing, in game 6 against the Royals, the third out with Cardinals ahead in I don't know if it was the 9th or 8th inning, the guy was plainly out at first base, and they called him safe, and the Royals came back and scored a run. It's considered one of the worst calls
in baseball. Yeah.
History. And even the umpire, you know, they've interviewed him, and he's now seen the tapes, and he's like, yeah, I don't know why I saw it like I saw it, but I was clearly wrong. And then it just kind of ripped the heart out of the Cardinals, I think. And so in game 7, they barely showed up. But
yeah.
But the other thing, I was in the Bay Area during that time, and I was driving home in my VW microbus, and I got pulled over and they were playing the San Francisco Giants in the National League Championship Series.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get pulled over for speeding, and the cop comes up and he says, "You're going a little fast, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was trying to get home to hear the last inning of the baseball game." And he goes, "Oh, it's over. The Cardinals won." And I go, "Yeah," and which maybe wasn't smart in the middle of the Bay Area, right? So, but then he goes, "Are you a Cardinals fan?" "I'm a Cardinals fan."
Oh, and nice.
Here's a warning.
That's awesome. Speeding in a microbus too. What's going on? You must have had that thing pegged.
Yeah. You can't speed on the freeways in those things. You can locally.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Back to records. What do you got next?
Records. So I'll show a few blues records. So blues records are another area where I have really put a lot of effort. And, you know, we were talking about jazz. There was a phrase, and I'm not sure I fully buy into it, but I can't remember if it was maybe in the Ken Burns documentary about jazz. But somebody says all jazz is blues, but not all blues is jazz. Yeah. And I mean, certainly not all blues is jazz. I'm not sure that you can really say, oh, there's jazz music that's not. I think there is, you know, now
they're siblings at the very least.
They definitely are siblings. Yeah. And so here's another 10-inch. This is Lead Belly, and I've got a number of his records. I mean, he's not the founder of the blues, but a very early, blues artist, and I love his stuff. It's just so authentic, and so I'll start with that, and then I've got some Howlin' Wolf. His stuff is so hard to find in nice shape and original copies. I don't have a complete collection of his stuff, but here's a few. So I've got a couple. There's a stereo and mono copy of more Real Folk Blues on the Blue Chest label. And then I always like this record. This was when they were trying to push him, and there's another one with Muddy Waters. Yeah. That's awesome. First either. That was on the Cadet Concept, kind of a psych psych blues label.
Okay.
That's trying to push them in a more commercial direction. Then I've got some Lightning Hopkins here. And these are just samples. I mean, this is one of his very early records, 59, that was pressed. Here's another on Bluesville.
Is there kind of a preeminent or what's the top of the heap for blues labels?
That's a good question. Well, Chess has certainly got a lot of great blues artists. They were rock and roll as well, but Chess is one. I think Bluesville, or this is part of, blanking on the name of, is it Prestige? I think this is part of Prestige jazz label, and Bluesville was their more blues label. You ask a good question, and I haven't really given it much thought. I don't know that I have a good answer.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
I don't. I'm just now getting into blues. I've started to collect Alligator record labels a lot because they're affordable. They're generally under $20.
Yeah.
I started with their two releases from '74, of course, which was Hound Dog Taylor and Fenton Robinson.
Right.
And then I just last night was listening to a Coco Taylor album. She's just, I mean, female blues singer, just amazing. She's just so fun to listen to. So they only released in the early to mid '70s. They were only releasing 1 or 2 or 3 albums a year. So it kind of feels like that's something I can get my hands around, and then I'll probably branch out into some other labels. But I've been loving the blues. Another thing that's fun is that because they usually use the blues scale and rhythm pattern, it's fun to play piano to or keys. So because you can just basically play right along. It's pretty formulaic, and it's taught me. I've learned a lot more improvisation because of it on the keyboard. I'll put it like a Hammond organ sound or something like that, and that's really fun. So playing along with the blues is a lot easier than a lot of other genres, and so I've been digging it, but I do have a whole lot more to learn about the blues and the history of it and stuff like that.
That's interesting. I mean, you're making me think there were some, the blues became very popular in England in the early 60s and then on into the 70s. And there were several British blues labels. So Blue Horizon is one. Fleetwood Mac, I think, was on that label in their early formation. And they're a great electric blues band at that time. A number of other bands, but of course that's what Clapton came out of. I think it's fundamental. The blues are just fundamental to so much other music, jazz and rock and roll.
Yeah.
So I'll show one more of Lightning's here. This is on that really psych label, American Artists, that had 13th floor elevators on them, and really rare record. It's the only one that has Lightning on it. His only pressing for that label, but it's a great psych blues record. And here's one a little bit to illustrate the connection between the British players and Americans. It's John Lee Hooker playing with John Mayall and the Groundhogs on Cleve Records. Oh
wow.
Yeah, that's a hard one to find, and I found that at some record show somewhere recently. I'll show one more, and this just kind of illustrates a couple of other points that we might want to talk about. I just found this recently. And
yeah. Didn't you get that in Longview, or was that?
I did.
Okay. Yeah.
I did.
I've seen it. I think I saw it in your pile or your stack or something like that.
I think you're right. I should know, because I know it's just been recently. Yeah, I bought it in Longview. I did.
Okay.
I bought it off of Michael Samples, if anybody knows Michael.
Okay.
Michael is always a great source for great records. But this is a really cool record for a couple of reasons, which is why I bought it. It was on the Cook record label, which is kind of a historic record label, and isn't really necessarily all that well known. But there was a guy named Emery Cook, and he was a sound engineer, and he worked for Atlantic Records for a while. And he was very keen on trying to develop stereo sound on vinyl LPs to reproduce a true stereo record. And the first iteration of that was something he came up with, which was 2 mono tracks side by side on one side, and you had to have a dual tone arm playback machine turntable with 2 tone arms, if you can picture it, laying both tone arms at the start of the 2 mono tracks and letting them play simultaneously, and then remixing them together to get a stereo.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? And he called it binaural sound, and which means 2 ears instead of stereo. And but the complexity of the playback mechanism and the records, I mean, you wouldn't want to play them on your standard turntable. And so they didn't sell well. So he got fired from Atlantic Records, and he founded his own record company, Cook Records. And most of what they put out, he's got a bunch with Lizzie Miles out of New Orleans. And then he also went down to Trinidad and Tobago and created a pressing plant down there, which I'd love to, if I ever get a chance. It's on my list of places I'd like to visit and just see what's going on down there. But the other thing that this record kind of illustrated, this was a mono, by the way, but a blues record, and both the seams were split. And I just wanted to show the results of my repair there.
Yeah.
That's something I talked about a lot. I use this, it's called hinging tape. I don't know if you can see it.
You had a video that I watched last year or something on the repair. That was when I first discovered you, actually, I think. Was that video.
Sorry.
Yeah. Very cool. No, very informative.
Yeah. So at any rate, that's something else I really like as a collector, is improving the quality of the records I buy. And I do that with cleaning. I do it with seam repairs, and I do it with sleeving. So
I enjoy that as well. To me, to get a dirty I'll see that the record looks like it's in great shape, but it's really dusty and dirty, and maybe there's a seam split or something that I can glue. When I get it home and clean it, put it in a sleeve, put the rice paper sleeve in there, and there's just something really gratifying from taking something that's been ignored or discarded and making it fresh again. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Fluffy, let's see. Yeah, nobody finds the VC, the VC finds them. Fluffy is asking, and I'm curious too. Let's see, is this Fluffy asked, how did you find the VC, Doc?
So that's a great question. So I was in a record store here in Portland, and a guy named Mark Wald, that some of you guys may know Mark. He lives here in Portland with his wife Elise, and they're a great vinyl couple. And I was in a shop called Exiled Records, which I recommend. That is a record store here. And the owner somehow knew that I was kind of working in Seattle, so back and forth to Seattle, and Mark somehow was also just recently up in Seattle. I don't know. So he introduced the two of us, and Mark told me about Mazzy, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm friends with Mazzy, and he and I have gone to stores together and made some videos together." And Mark's handle was Vinyl Crush. I think he's kind of stopped making videos, at least for now, but he's got a YouTube channel called Vinyl Crush. At any rate, he told me about Mazzy, and I looked at one of Mazzy's videos at some point, and then I ran into him at the record show up in Tacoma, the Tacoma record show. So I was at that, and Mazzy was there, and we just struck up a conversation. And he had a friend that I'll say did end up needing spine surgery, and so that was a very fortuitous thing. I ended up taking over her care, and I don't want to divulge. I can't divulge private information, but I did take care of his friend for her spine surgery problem. That became part of the friendship. But he and I then have become great friends since then, and really I've met everybody else I've met, maybe including you, through my connections with Mazzy.
Yeah, he is like Raji says, he's the Kevin Bacon of the VC. He tends to be the one that connects a lot of us, which is really cool. I appreciate him for that.
Right.
Yeah.
6 degrees of
Norman Maslow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's
fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of record stores in Portland, I like Crossroads, of course, because it's like an antique mall for record, but it's all just records. So there's 20 different rock sections and 20 different country sections and so far. I can spend hours and hours and hours there,
Right.
which is fun, but it can be a little overwhelming. And I actually I get I get dug out I after a while, which I didn't think I would ever get tired of digging, but like 3 hours at Crossroads, and I'm like, okay, I've done this enough, right?
Right.
Um, when we were up, when I first met you in person, we went to Little Axe
Right.
up there, which was really good.
Right.
I'm not as a huge fan of Jackpot. I don't. I got my turntable at Fred's Stereo, just down the block, and Bill, the manager in there, spent about an hour and a half with me, going through everything, and it blew my mind. That stuff's way over my head, but it was really fun. So I got my project there. But
Cool.
do you have some favorite record shops in Portland that you go to?
Sure, I can go through that, and I agree. So Little Axe is on my list of favorites.
Yeah.
My other favorites, there's one called Dig over in what's called the Selwood neighborhood. That's the
Okay.
closest to where we live here. It's a great store, and he does some collaboration with the guys who have Records by Mail, which is one of the first online sales organizations for vinyl. Craig Moore is the guy who owns that, and he started that. I mean, I think he was doing record collecting and selling before the internet, and then was one of the first to go up on the internet with his records for sale. And he used to scour the country, in his car and buy records as he went, I think with his brother. I met him down in Austin, and I'm hoping to do an interview video with him at some point. But so Scott is the owner over there at Dig, and he has somehow a connection and can walk through the aisles at Records by Mail and pick out some records to go put in his store. Another one that I really like is called Tomorrow Records, which is over on Hawthorne Avenue.
Yeah, I've been there. I like that place.
That's a
Yeah.
great place. Patrick is the manager there, and they just, it's all about supply. I mean, it's all about
It
getting
really is.
in, and those
Yeah.
places do. Yeah, you mentioned Little Axe. I mentioned Exiled earlier. I like them. I do like Crossroads. I think the key to Crossroads is picking a couple of the sellers that you most like, because there's a lot of variability, right? And
There is. Yeah.
finding a couple, and then you don't have to be there 4 hours. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'll find the same record for one will be for $30 and the same record will be for $8,
right, exactly,
Yeah.
right, in the same store. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's one that's off of, I think, a lot of people's radar screen is called Jump Jump Records.
Oh, haven't heard of that.
Yeah, that is run out of his own house by a guy named Dan, who he used to run what was called the Night Owl Record Show, which finally dissolved. The place, they had it for years, and I used to love going to that show. It was up in a kind of a gentleman's, not a strip club, a gentleman's club, like a, I don't know what you call it, like Rotary, something like that.
Yeah.
They had a bar adjacent to the selling space, and restaurant and bar. It was really cool sale, and then somehow that facility got closed and the record sale went away. But Dan runs this out of his own house. He's got his dog. His name is Happy. Is always present and will come up and is just very easygoing, wants to be petted, and then once you pet him, he's fine. And his cat will also come out and wander through the stacks as you're looking through records.
Yeah.
And he has just been on the vinyl scene in Portland for decades. I think he knows everybody, and I think he's still a lot of people's first go-to for selling records. So I would recommend you check that out.
Okay.
That's on the north side, out close to the airport too. So depending on, well, you would be driving in, but anybody that flew into Portland, you could get there. It's within about 10 minutes of the airport. So,
Okay.
yeah.
How about let's see. Paul mentions Mississippi Records. I haven't been to Mississippi yet.
Mississippi Records is an interesting place, and I like it, and I support their mission. They're similar to, what was the other one you mentioned over on
Jackpot?
Yeah, Jackpot. So both of those for me are not necessarily you don't find that much high-end original used vinyl there. I do some, and I like going in. They both have a very pleasant vibe, but they also both run their own pressing label.
They have their own label. Yeah.
They do. And Mississippi also has live acts that they sponsor as part of their place. Jackpot doesn't have that, but they're very connected to sort of the vinyl revival, we'll say.
Okay.
And so I give a lot of credit to both stores. It depends what you're looking for, but you can certainly find good vinyl. Both stores have a lot of new vinyl, sealed vinyl and new pressings. So both are great stores. I wouldn't leave.
That's one thing I found with Music Millennium. Now, my only experience at Music Millennium was on Record Store Day, and I didn't know really what Record Store Day was. And I just so happened to be going to Portland on, I don't know if it was in last September or whenever it was, and I waited in line for like 2 hours to get in to dig, and they wouldn't let you dig. You had to file all the way through and keep going. Because people were there just to get the RSD. So my experience there was just like, I wanted to go in and dig a while, but I need to go back sometime, of course, when it's not RSD and take a look. Do you ever go to Music Millennium?
I do. And I would say the same thing about them. They, for collectible used vinyl, it's not always the place to go, although, a lot of good used, and I give a lot of credit. It's been they're going to have their 50th year, I think 50th anniversary celebration coming up. So I remember one, and this is also it's a record collector lesson. So there was an ad that came up. Music Millennium advertises in the local throwaway. They're one of the only record stores that do, and they had this ad about just acquired a record collection from a long-term collector. We've got a ton of vinyl up here, and come take a look. And I went through, and there were boxes. They hadn't really organized it. It was just they priced it. It was all out. All of these boxes. They had it in a separate room, and I'm just like going through all this stuff, and I pulled out close to a box of records that I bought that day, and I got some of the details. So the guy whose record collection it was a record store owner at one point, and he was a completist. I mean, this guy had not just the collectible records, but he would then go on with an act from the 60s into the 70s and 80s, and every greatest hits, every compilation record, every reissue, he had a copy of. And they related that he had passed away. His family needed somewhere to sell his collection, and they had clearly, there were no Elvis records. There were a lot of 50s records, but Elvis was absent. And 50s and 60s, early 60s rock and roll. And I think what had happened, the family inherited his records, didn't really know what to do with them, probably put an ad online and had some collectors come cherry pick them, and then sold the bulk of it to this place. And then you end up with, guys like me that are totally, I'm not there respecting his collection. I mean, I am in a way, but I'm really mauling through it. And I picture that as the end of my record collection. I mean, my family wouldn't know what to do with it. My wife, my wife thinks she would, but my kids, neither of them have much interest in it, and I've tried to talk to them about it. So I think I'm going to try to, make arrangements for a new home. Here's my lovely
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'll let you keep going.
Oh, thank
good.
you. So it's something to think about. Where do you want the record collection to go?
That leads me to the question. What I think I only have a couple thousand records at this point, but
a couple thousand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not in your ballpark, man.
Never.
What when you think of let's say you're in the you're going to be spinning records as long as you're alive, I'm sure. But are you going to get to a point where you're going to try to get rid of a lot of your collection before, or is it just like you're going to your kids are going to take care of that, or have you thought about that? Surely you thought about that.
I have, and I guess I really don't know. I think I am going to. I'm going to ask my kids to pick 100 records, or however many that you would really like to keep, that remind you of our family, or this and that, or that you just love the music, or whatever it is. And I bought my son a basic turntable setup for his birthday when he was in junior high, and he barely touched it. I bought him a stack of records, like Queen Day at the Races and Eagles Greatest Hits and stuff that he could play for his buddies, and it just never happened. He never really dug in on it. My daughter does have a turntable, and her boyfriend, her current boyfriend, is also into music and is into vinyl a little bit, so they would have the bandwidth for it. But then I think, there are these archives. There's one out in New York City. I'm sure there's more than just that one, but I have thought, I honestly think financially, I mean, your choices are to sell it to a collector, or somebody, probably a flipper of some sort that's going to sell a lot of the records, or you can give it to an archive. But what they do is also kind of the same thing. They go through and they pull out everything they don't have good copies of and add it to their collection. And then everything else gets sold down the street, right? So it's just a lesson in the impermanence of all of us.
Indeed, that's exactly right. And you could piecemeal it out, obviously, and probably end up, because you've been collecting for long enough, your records, most of them have appreciated from what you've originally paid for them. Do you enjoy selling records at all?
That's something I'm trying to get more into, and I have promised myself I'm going to learn it. I've never sold a record on Discogs or online.
Neither have I, and I want to, because I have a few records now that I can't sell down at the antique shop. Like, I'll show you here, something like this, which is I got these ambient records. This is Elaine Radigue or whatever, and this is basically droning music with a Tibetan chant. and they go for like $250.
Wow.
On Discogs. And like there's none for sale of this right now, and 1,300 people want it.
Oh my God.
But I can't sell this down at my antique. I'm not going to keep it. No. It's on the lovely music record label, and I'm not going to keep it. So I want to find somebody that is interested in this, and I have probably now 20 of these kind of ambient avant-garde. One of them is
scored with his purchase, man.
Blue Jean Tyranny. This is Out of the Blue, and this is this is a little more jazz, but very strange avant-garde kind of music. And this goes for, I have it at 85, but they go for over $100. And the guy I got these from, when I press the record down, it's when you get a record that hasn't been listened to, you kind of got to press the spindle down over there, because it's right. and the vinyl doesn't look like it's ever been played. So I actually I scored. Do you know about the Reed Streams, the Terry Riley record? Did you hear me talk about that at the record show at all?
Yeah, you showed me that.
It was, and I got about another 5 of Terry Riley's records. And
all right. We got to talk.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I would definitely appreciate your counsel and some direction.
Well, I might be a good customer too, Marty.
Okay. Do you like avant-garde stuff? And
yeah, I do. I do. I don't have an exhaustive collection of it. I've got some Terry Riley. I've got some Steve Reich.
That Steve. I have that Steve Reich. This one here, yeah, from '74. This was part of that too. Do you know about this album or this box set?
That album. I barely know much about him. But I know who he is. I've got some Philip Glass. I've got stuff like that. Some John Cage. Not
Meredith Monk, is it?
I don't know that.
Sure, but there were several, probably 10 or 15 of these albums on Lovely Music that are all kind of the same genre. Well, so yeah, when we get together soon, I'll bring a stack and see what you think about them. And
Yeah, I'd love
And,
to see him. And I mean, nice score, incredible score that you got on that collection. Good work.
it was, and in fact, he has this guy who's retiring and moving to a retirement facility. He was a playwright back in New York, but has lived in Silverton, our town here, for the last 20 or 25 years. And his partner died about a month ago, and he's just deciding it's time for him to. I walked into his house, and it was just huge paintings and art everywhere. He was playing on a Steinway grand piano when I came over, so it was just so neat to meet him and to make a friend out of him. But he has a whole bunch of classical and opera records that he's going to be passing my way in the next month or two. And I don't know. I'm just now getting into classical pressings and stuff like that, but I don't know anything about opera. Is there people? I assume there's people who collect those, but I
Right.
wouldn't even know where to begin.
Yeah, no, there definitely are. But that's a blank spot for me for
Yeah.
sure. Classical and opera, but there are people who, and it's a much smaller group of folks, but it's out there, and some of those records are just extremely sought after and very
Okay.
pricey too. Yeah, and I know that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he has they weren't played much. Most of his stuff is in near mint condition, which is really great. So it basically just sat on the shelf for years and years there. And yeah, I'm I'm excited to see what's there. And of course, when you're learning about something new, it's exciting too, because it just opens up all these doors for you and
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
So okay, what do you have anything there?
I
What's
have
next on the list?
A couple more if you want to do them. So
Let's do them.
this was also for me when I was a young man, probably 18. I guess I was maybe 19, 20, something like that. So the first place I ever thought I might want to be a doctor was at a Grateful Dead show in Des Moines, Iowa.
Oh wow.
I was there with my buddies. This was the first Dead album I ever bought, but I was at their show, watching the show, and it just, I was at that point, I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do with my life, and I wasn't happy with the way things were going necessarily, and it just popped in my head. Oh, I guess I could be a doctor. And immediately after that, the day after that, I started looking into it and finding out what I needed to do that. So it was a religious moment. I feel like I owe to the Grateful Dead my career path a little
Interesting.
bit. And
Is that an R. Crumb? Did R. Crumb do that album
this
cover?
is not. It looks like it. It
Does
definitely
good, isn't it?
is a
Okay.
derivative of R. Crumb, but this is Live 72. It's a triple album, one of the very few triple albums, and God, I just played the grooves off of this thing. It has so
Okay.
many great songs. It's Live in Europe 72. And then this is
Terrapin
another,
Station, yeah.
yeah, and Terrapin
Cool.
Station. This is a record I love, and this is another one I wanted to illustrate the white label promo on this. Terrapin Station, the song Terrapin Station, is one long suite without any breaks, and you can't play the whole thing on the radio. So there are long songs like that are then pressed on a promo label where they've got visible gaps between the songs, so you can put the needle down ahead
Oh, okay.
of one part of a longer song.
That's
So,
neat. I
yeah,
hadn't thought about that, about promos and stuff like that they would have a bigger gap between the songs so you could lay the needle down. That's
Yeah.
neat. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I needed to. So
Did you so you loved the Dead then after
did.
that?
I still,
Okay.
yeah, I went out last summer with some buddies we used to go to shows back in the day, and saw them play at the Sphere in Las Vegas. I recommend that for anybody who's interested. But it wasn't cheap. I will say concert going has become, I mean, those are
It's crazy, isn't it?
kind of
Yeah.
ridiculously expensive,
Yeah.
but man, that facility, and I think they're going to be more built like the Sphere
Right.
there.
Yeah. My cousins went and saw U2 there. They said it was mind-blowing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It becomes part of the show for sure.
Yeah.
The theater is part of the show. So
That's cool.
yeah.
Speaking of the Dead, do you like Old and in the Way?
Yeah, I do. I saw Jerry with who's the mandolin player? Grisman, David Grisman.
Okay.
I saw him once with John Kahn, who was his I think he's I don't remember what instrument he is. I can't remember if John Kahn's in Older and in the Way. He might be. but he's an acoustic guy too that plays with Jerry in some other settings. And so I saw several of those shows back in the day. I like bluegrass. I mean, I like bluegrass. I like country and western. I didn't bring any of that. Mostly for country stuff, I like old classic country more than newer stuff. So I like to chase down Hank Williams Sr. and Jimmy Rogers stuff. And, I've expanded into some other artists, but that's where I've started, early Willie Nelson. I like his stuff. So
yeah, I'm a big fan. That's one art. Willie is one artist that I'm sort of a completist on. I have about 10 or 15 of his albums. Really like his stuff. I bought a collection last year, just a small collection that had late 60s, early 70s Merle Haggard and Waylon Jennings albums, and those are really good. They all have cigarettes in their hands, on the covers of those albums. Those are really good. I'm still looking for Johnny Cash's 2 albums from '74, which I haven't seen in the wild at all. One of them is The Junkie and the Juice Box, or The Juice Box and the Junkie, or something like that. And the other one is Ragged Old Flag, I think.
Oh man, those would both be cool. I don't have either of those.
Yeah, I see his albums from the late '60s quite a bit.
Yeah,
but not those from the '70s.
Right. No, I love Johnny Cash, and I'll tell you, that last series that he put out for American Records, I think, that is those are worth looking into.
Yeah.
I mean, he's somebody who clearly was committed, and you talk about Americana now; it's a new genre, right? I mean,
right.
He sang Americana music from the get-go.
Yeah, before it was called that. Absolutely. I was fascinated by those couple late albums there. I think was that Rick Rubin that produced an album in there. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that was his label, American Recordings or something.
Yeah. He you look at Johnny's face and he looks like he's 85, but he's only about 71, maybe 72.
Yeah.
And it really is an expression of that hard life, the drug use and it just takes the years off, shaves him right off your life. And he was, I think he was only like 73 or 74 when he died.
That may be.
Yeah, he wasn't as old as he looks, not even close.
Right.
But he just aged tremendously. I have about 15 years ago, my neighbor, when we had our farm up on the hill here, was an old guy that was a truck driver and a logger and in and out of prison. And he was actually at the concert in Folsom Prison. He was serving time in Folsom Prison, and he actually him and his buddy dropped acid during the concert, and he told a story about seeing the band members as alligators. They look like alligators. Yeah, he was a great storyteller.
Yeah,
just a really wild guy. But that would have been interesting. Anyway, I wanted to ask.
Oops.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I'm here. I didn't hear what you just said.
Did you play music in the operating room?
Yes, I did. There are restrictions. Like, they show these videos of guys dancing. I'd never fucking danced. I never fucking danced in my OR. I always took it very seriously, but we did, I back in the day when I first started out, I had all these CDs, and I bought a notebook that I could put CDs in and carry them in, and there was a CD player. So, and then of course later it's all just streaming online and stuff. But so I'll tell you one funny story. I had a Captain Beefheart CD, and there's that, I think it was Docket Radar Station. It has this song, Ashtray Heart. It's a really mean breakup song, and it's like, you use me like an ashtray heart, stubbed out my love, or whatever. I don't know. But so I had finished my work at the OR table and had broken scrub, they call it, taken my gloves and gown off, and was just packing up. And our scrub nurse, very nice young woman, was still scrubbed in and having to, clean up and put dressings on and all of that. And I walked over and I put on that CD, and that song came on, and I had it fairly loud. And she says, she was almost in tears. She's like, Dr. Hart, would you please stop this music? So I did. I took it off. Yeah, I didn't want to.
Did you have you know, assistants, surgical assistants that were with you for years at a time?
I had yes, several over the years, and you know, it actually is really important to have consistency in that role, because you know there are these tools that you know you use regularly and
Mhm.
end up with specific names for, let's say, or you know, processes that you do the same every time. And when you're working with somebody brand new, you've got to say, okay, now this is how we do that, this is how we do this. And when it becomes like, I won't say it's seamless, but it becomes a much more fluid
Yeah.
operation, as you can imagine.
I can
And
imagine that you, in those moments where they're feeling your vibe and they're responding to you before you make the, you know, get ask for a tool or something like that. It's in your hand or it's right next to you. That must be a kind of like a flow state, I guess, sort of situation.
it is a very much a you know, you want it to be seamless, and you know, when it's really working, you just put your hand out without saying anything and they know what to give you and put it.
Yeah.
So and it's so much better for the patient, because you know, it moves more quickly and easily.
Right. Did you so at about it would have been about 04, 05, 06 or whatever, things would have transitioned from the analog to the digital imaging realm.
Yes.
Did how was that transition from looking at film to a screen? You did that probably some while you're operating, or was that mostly a pre-op kind of a thing?
Yeah, we always posted it. So you would back in the day when it was solid films, there's a light box and you put all the films up in
Mhm.
the OR. So you know, they're 10 feet from you, and if you need to, you walk over and take a look. And then we use live imaging, which used to be just X-ray, but now you can get three-dimensional imaging that's like a CAT scan in the operating room, or you know, robotic guidance, all this stuff. You know, that was coming to fruition when I was kind of on the downside of my career,
Mhm.
and had you know, it would have taken, mastering things like that takes maybe a year or two of dedicated effort.
Mhm.
And early in my career, I was learning things that I hadn't learned in training in order to incorporate them. But at a certain point, you know, you're sort of like, it's just not worth, you know, it's not going to improve my technique fast enough or significantly enough to really make it worth pursuing that. And so you leave that to the next generation of surgeons. At least that's what I did.
Yeah. When I
But
was in the imaging, I grew up, my dad was an X-ray tech, and then he became an administrator at an imaging place and stuff. And so I got to work with him for about 6 years. I was a PACS administrator at a clinic here in Salem for a while. And so we made the analog to digital convert change, you know, and
mhm.
getting rid of all the film jackets, you know,
Oh
the
my
rows
God.
and rows of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was still a handful of surgeons who demanded that we print film for them.
Really?
Yeah, so even though we were, uh, you know, sending them CDs at the time, and then at the end they would just log in and be able to scroll through the 16 slice or whatever.
Mm.
They would demand that we would ship them hard films, and that went on for a couple of years
Yeah.
after the fact. They just didn't want to make the change, and you know, and most of them, to their credit, most of them were just right. It was right before their retirement and whatever, and they weren't
Right.
they were good at what they did, and they didn't need to do that. But now there's just no. I think most of these places you can't even print film,
No.
really.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. And yeah, it's interesting. That was an interesting transition, and I didn't quite answer your question, but you know, to me, that was one of the great steps forward. You know, that was one where technology really benefited, I felt, because we
Yeah.
used to have to go down to the film room and check them out, and then somebody would have already checked them out, and nobody knows where they're at, and it was a pain in the ass when it was just hard copy film. But the digital films are, yeah, that was transformative. And
Yeah, and I remember just making sure that I had, you know, ten pieces of film in order, right?
mhm,
Each slice of the MRI or the CT or whatever, you wanna make sure that they're not out of order, so they get when he
right.
puts them up, You know, he's not going to jump around back and forth
Right,
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun time. I really enjoyed those years doing that. It was very, very educational and taught me a lot about that industry.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
Cool. So, so you retired. When did you retire?
September 2023, so
Okay.
about a year and a half now.
How's that been for you?
Well, it's been really good. You know about my wife's illness, which
Yeah.
is the only difficult part. But she retired around the same time I did, and
And she was a physician as well. Is that
she
right?
was, yeah,
What was her specialty?
she was a liver transplant surgeon.
No
So,
kidding.
yeah, she had a worse schedule than I
Fascinating.
did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, we kind of patched things together. We had a full-time nanny for our son, and we just did as much as we could to be home as much as we could. But
Yeah.
yeah, we have a lot of friends that are two surgeon couples, and
Okay.
it's you could form a coffee clutch around that.
Yeah. Well, you know, you speak the same language, so I can imagine that part of your affection was based. I mean, you said you met your wife in school. Did you meet
No, I met her here at OHSU.
in Oregon? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
I was married once before. So
Okay.
and so no, we had a great life together, and we've had a great retirement. I would recommend retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get back to more. We're still traveling and seeing music. That was what we were really focusing on, and other stuff, you know. But we've seen a lot of live shows since retiring, and you know, a lot of which we've traveled for. You know, and that's not the only thing you do, but you travel someplace and incorporate seeing somebody perform that you really have wanted to see. It makes it a lot of fun. So,
Do you have any interests outside of vinyl and music that you enjoy?
none to speak of.
No,
No, that's we do a lot of you know, we ski as a family. We do some paddle boarding. We have a jet ski. We put that in the water when we can, and
Do you go out on the Willamette there?
we do the
Okay.
Willamette and Columbia mainly. And
Now, how far north of the Canby Ferry are you? Do you know?
you know, I guess we must be about 20 minutes. So we're
Okay.
about 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes north of Oregon City.
Okay.
And so that's right where the Willamette Falls are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
The Canby Ferry would be on the other side of the falls.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So yeah, that's in the and those were, by the way, I think that those were the very first areas of Oregon to get kind of populated.
That's right. Oregon City is the oldest city in Oregon.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. They've
Yeah.
got a description of it there, and you know, I'm not completely sure why that would have been where they wanted to stop. I mean, the Columbia River Gorge is another very historic area. You know, Lewis and Clark came down through there with Pocahontas.
It's
And,
breathtaking. There's people don't understand or realize until they see it the magnitude of the mighty Columbia. And going from Portland, you know, out towards Multnomah Falls, and then you hit Hood River, which is like the windsurfing capital of the world, or was for at least a long time.
Right.
And then further east, you hit the Dalles, and all of a sudden you're going from fir trees to pine trees, and then to no trees. Once you get over there by Hermiston and stuff like that, it really is a special place.
yeah,
Driving, I every time I get to drive the gorge in the truck back and forth, unless it's blowing too hard, which it does blow sometimes. It gets really windy.
it gets
Yeah.
some wind out there. Yeah,
But I never get tired of driving the gorge. You know, the 84 goes right along the water there. And another thing I really love doing is at least once a summer I take the motorcycle and I'll loop below Mount Hood, and then come out in Hood River there, and then cross the river and come back on, I forget what the road is on the Washington side.
right. I don't remember
But I'll
either.
come back to Oregon. There's some really awesome viewpoints and vistas from the
Yeah.
Washington side.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's 2-lane instead of 4-lane.
Right,
But it's, you know, some of the structures, and when you learn a little bit about the geology of how the gorge was formed, and the Missoula floods and stuff like that, it's a special place. It really is. It's right in our backyard. You know, I mean, it's what Multnomah Falls is like 30
Mhm.
minutes from your place. You know,
Right.
it's a little bit too. It can get too busy, you know, these days. A lot of people going out there, and
Right.
I just heard they closed the scenic highway indefinitely. They're up above Vista Point. You know where Vista Point is? That is it Rooster Rock or whatever it is there, because of they've had part of the roads have sunk
Oh,
because of the water and stuff. They've had slides in there, so that's going to be closed for a little. I don't know if getting to Vista Point is not even possible now, or
I hadn't
not.
heard.
That's yeah. I all that is just great motorcycle country. Really fun to and then of course driving out Highway 32 Astoria. You don't get as much of the gorge feeling, but
No.
you can cross the there's a ferry there across to not Kalama, but across to the Washington side, and then back. And of course, then the Astoria Bridge is really cool,
Mhm.
crossing over there. Yeah, we live in there's so much diversity. Do you when you talked about skiing? Do you go to Meadows or Timberline? Where do you go?
Yeah, we would go to Meadows or Bachelor locally. And, my wife grew up going down to Mammoth Mountain in Southern California, and so we would meet her family down there most years. You know, we'd spend
Okay.
time there with them, and I don't know, but we skied all over. But I haven't skied internationally much. You know, Canada, if you want to include that. But
Yeah.
I'm an adult skier. I learned when I was 40, which means I don't do moguls and I don't do black diamonds. My wife.
Oh, I think I lost you,
Oh,
Doc.
oh, darn it! What
Well,
happened?
no, okay, we're back. We're back
Oh,
again.
sorry.
Okay. So
God,
yeah, you were just saying that you started skiing when you were 40.
yeah. So I learned when I was 40, which means I don't do moguls and I don't do black diamonds. And my wife grew up skiing from the time she was like 4 or 5, and my wife's actually a much better athlete than I am, and so she occasionally will lead me onto a slope that I have no fun on. But it's just you gotta sort of figure, you
Yeah.
gotta make some compromises, I'll say.
I've only skied a couple times. I used to ski when I was younger and not as wise. Now I'm a little bit scared of tearing an ACL or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I went a couple years ago with my buddy at Bachelor, and that was a blast. We had a really he flew up from Arizona and we had a really good time. That was the only time I've ever been to Bachelor. But for a while that was that was one of the only places in North America to ski all year round, I think. I think Timberline you still can.
Yeah, Timberline you can. You
Yeah.
have to hike up to it. I think the lifts are
Yeah.
closed, or maybe the lifts will take you up to where you got to hike from or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
I'm not that dedicated. I have some friends who are, but
Yeah, some people get into it. I just can't. I never did learn to snowboard. My daughters do,
yeah, I don't.
but I never did get into that.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, we're kind of I think we're at a natural ebb now or whatever, or flow. And I want to thank you so much, Doc, for coming on today and going through the records. I learned a lot. It's great to have you here and in Oregon, and to call you my friend. And I look forward to getting together soon. I'd love to go with you to Dig Records and maybe a few of your other haunts that I haven't been to. That'd be blast. So I'll be keeping in touch with you, and we'll find a day and grab some lunch and make an afternoon of it sometime if you're up for it.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it. Yeah, thanks for putting this together. It was very kind.
Yeah, I really enjoy this kind of interview discussion forum. I'm kind of getting in my groove, I think, a little bit. So yeah, it's fun. I'm enjoying it. So anyway, so thanks everybody for showing up. The normal crew is all here, and I really appreciate it. And we will see you next week at the same time. So see ya.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Doc. Oh,
Bye.
no, there we go. Now I'm ended.